Welcome back to the show, and today we don't talk a lot about animated movies, but I think this is one that we should kind of break it up. I think it's important enough to talk about on our show.
Yeah, I appreciate the first time I mentioned this film online discourse was hearing about it on January 7th of this year. So I feel really confident that we're talking about it 1 week before the end of the year because I finally got a chance to check it out.
Yeah, we talk about one of these that's getting really high praise, so let's continue the show. Let's talk about Flow.
Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Yes, you found us. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. For our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Another way you can support the show, you know it, I'm going to say it. Join the Patreon for great deals, great content, and, of course, an opportunity to tell us what movies we could review on a future episode. Of course, a shout out to you as well. Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Association. We got to get our film critics.
I've got a top 100.
Yeah, we got to get that in. Check out the Film Critics reviews as well as ours. And today we're talking about our animated full feature film, Flow. What's going on?
So when a cat living a solitary life is forced to leave his home due to a destructive flood, he ends up on a boat with other homeless animals who will all have to learn to support each other in order to survive.
Even if you haven't seen the movie, you understand the premise is 100% animation. There's not a lot of at all dialogue.
Yep.
A lot of sound editing, a lot of sound mixing. It's in my top 10 right now.
I found the film incredibly fascinating, especially from a cat owner's perspective, because I actually had my new kitten in bed with me while we watched it, and he couldn't keep his eyes off the screen. So cats alone, the approval's there.
The whole process of the movie, you see a lot of them looking at the reflections through water. You see the lemurs are kind of stuck. Even when things are dangerous, like, you better get moving, they're stuck with their looking at the reflections from mirrors. And it's this duality of looking at yourself, almost like we take humans away, that dogs and animals and all these creatures kind of almost behave like us.
Yeah.
Instead, not too much be subservient to us, but actually they're a little bit of similar. It looks kind of authentic. I don't know if they watched animals. I think in the credits you can see it, but it looks very authentic of animal movement, and I think that's another capturing moment of this.
Yeah, it's weird because the going into it, the poster looks really gorgeously animated, but the animation style, if you're just looking at frames, I don't know that it stands out as much.
No.
But seeing it in movement and the way in which they chose to animate certain elements of the animals to kind of give them, I don't know, a little bit more emotional resonance versus others, I think the animation style is interesting because it doesn't look like really anything that we're seeing currently in animated films, and I think that's what makes it stand out, and I also think that's what it gives it kind of a dream narrative too.
Yeah, and you get this collective group that on the pictures, they almost seem like cast-offs.
Yeah.
They almost seem they can't be part of the group. They all have to be their own kind of collective group. But it flows. I know the title is very fitting. I mean, the water flow, but it's also like very fluid moving. There's not a lot of fast pace to this. It has this kind of singular pace that is consistent even when there's danger.
Yeah. It reminded me a lot of that I think it was a Studio Ghibli film we talked about a couple years ago, The Red Turtle, that had that same kind of a thing, like it being like a 95-minute movie that was basically without any word whatsoever, and it just followed kind of that visual storytelling. I think this is some of the best visual storytelling of the year. What's so funny is I saw this right before I saw Mufasa, the new Lion King film. There was a number of shots in that film that seemed taken out of this. I know they couldn't do that because you can't make a CGI film that quickly, but it was so interesting to me how they chose to use visual storytelling in both those films in order to be about a cat in a lot of ways.
Right, so you get totally enthralled with them surviving this flood. You get this kind of whale creature that kind of follows their path, doesn't really infringe around them, just kind of keeping an eye on them. But even in the movie when death is presented, it's not this scary, traumatic thing. It's almost like a nice, slow process that eventually we all go to.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard thing to watch with these kinds of characters because, again, being a pet owner, we see animals in danger, especially ones that are associated with being pets, and we get concerned.
Yeah, anytime animals are in danger in film, we're like, no!
Right, I'm a cat person, you're a dog person, but we see a pet in danger, and it's tough. And I think that's the case with this lead cat character. I was incredibly invested because they kicked the hell out of him the entire movie. He's getting his ass kicked. So it's not like he's constantly avoiding danger. He's constantly in danger.
Right. And he intentionally goes in the water. It's like, what cat does that? But it's animation, right?
Well, I've got
he kind of follows. Well, he does it. Follows the fish, right? He likes the fish, right? But there's very much, without saying anything, you totally understand personalities. You totally understand that, okay, we all have to kind of put aside our differences and get together. We understand those kind of themes. But it's shot beautifully. I don't know what world this is. I don't care, but it looks it's like an ancient but a mixture of
it was
modern.
it was hard to tell if it was post-apocalyptic or heavily pre-apocalyptic. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But I was invested in the world. I wanted to know more about it, but not necessarily requiring it to enjoy the film.
No.
It leaves you, I think, with enough of kind of a unreality that it doesn't have to be as specific to our world, but it is connective enough that you can understand the animal's danger. I thought it was really funny that they actually were so adamant about getting the correct animal sounds that they like recorded animal sounds for the film.
Yeah.
And the only one that isn't the exact animal is the capybara, which is voiced by a baby camel, because they just couldn't get the right sound that made it sound like a capybara would.
He's right. The capybara steals a lot of scenes.
Yep. Yeah, I think they had to do maybe a longer stretch of vocal work with that.
Right.
But it's nice to see. I like that the film opens with a very small kind of a situation. This movie feels like a video game. In that,
I've heard many people say that. I want to play this video game, right?
Because there is that film Stray, or that video game Stray that came out where you play a cat in a futuristic world trying to find its home. And I feel like that's kind of the vibe I got from this. You get introduced to him kind of through a tutorial, if you will. He's off to catch a fish, and he runs across a bunch of dogs and has to escape. And that feels like an inciting incident, even though it really has little bearing to do other than introducing us to the...
Right,
it's almost like the dog as a villain, I guess.
Right, and they're not a threat to most of them. I like how the bird gets abandoned, and I was like, all right, well, I'll join your group too.
Yeah, I guess I'm here.
But there's a kind of the delusion that all of this is soft and fun. There are certain dangers to this. It almost feels like Watership Down, where it feels like, oh, it's an animation. I mean, I feel comfortable watching this, and then you see some very hectic things into it.
Yeah, Watership Down, Animal Farm, like those kinds of danger to the main animals,
right.
and kind of how their society can mirror ours in a lot of ways. I kept thinking of the Alfred Hitchcock movie Lifeboat. But I think it was just because they were in a boat together and couldn't trust one another.
Right, when they see the other dogs that need to be rescued, you're like, all right, we'll go get them, right?
I turned to my wife at that point because we had both just been talking about Hot Shots 2, and I was thinking about that scene where the two Sheens pass each other and said, "I love you in Wall Street." That's an aside. I thought that I think the introduction of having the dogs as the villains before the story begins introduces that distrust that we would then have for those animals as it goes on, and the need for the support. Yeah. This is one of the best cases in recent times where I can say it's not the story you tell, but how you tell it, because you could see this movie being released by a Pixar, being a drastically different film. I'm not saying a better or worse film, but being a drastically different visual-looking film.
Right, same script and give it to Pixar, it'd be kind of totally different.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this film stands out. Is we both don't know how to say the guy's name. Gintz Zilbalotis. I'm going.
Yeah, he did Away. I've never seen Away.
He's done a couple other features, and I'm flabbergasted that none of them have come our way. But of course, this film is the Latvian entry for the best international films at the Oscars. Because if you don't know, each country has its own committee that selects the film that they put forward as their entry for best international film. Yeah. And that's why you saw Godzilla -1 didn't get selected last year. They chose Perfect Days in Japan to be their entry,
which we reviewed.
So in this case,
reviewed both of them.
The Latvian entry was Flow, and that's why I think this movie will be up for best international feature, which is kind of funny because they used to call it best foreign language, and there's no language in this film.
Right. Fantastic year for animation. You have Look Back from Japan. You have Transformers 1. This movie. You have Wild Robot.
Yeah. And even the follow up with
if you're a little late to
Inside Out
game
2 is great. Yeah.
Yeah, Inside Out 2. If you're a little late to the game, Robot Dreams. They're just redid The Watchmen. Chapters 1 and 2 are out. They look fantastic. And I say it's been a fantastic year for animation. And this one tops them all. I mean, Wild Robot would have been up there.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
But then this one.
This one's probably the one that I'm going to go back to first. I'm still kind of recovering from. I quite enjoyed The Lord of the Rings: The War of the Rohirrim, which kind of came and went. I didn't realize that WB was not all that intensely pushing that film, but I quite enjoyed that one. I thought that was solid. So
the train that was in the depot for that one.
Yeah, so that one was another great one. I think it's a great year for animation. The funny thing is, the movie I thought I would like the most for animation was Moana 2, and it's the one I liked the least. So. I guess that's what we always say at the beginning of the year. Is the beginning of the year we know the big movies, but at the end of the year we know the little movies that could.
Yeah. So we're highly recommending, if you love watch Flow. Even if you're not I don't really appreciate animation, I think you enjoy it.
Yeah, and if you're not a cat person, but you're an like you care about an animal in your life, I think you'll find something here. You know, it
I haven't
made me
seen
care about capybaras.
I haven't seen one person give it a bad review. Everybody is fantastic.
Yeah, I can see varying levels of like, but I can't understand anyone who would walk out of that movie and not.
I hate this movie.
Feel something
Right,
because I think it accomplishes a lot of that distrust element that you even get with something like Life of Pi, but it does it in a more economic runtime.
Very memorable movie. Very memorable. Very wonderful color palettes and wonderful color animation. The only nitpick I would say, drawing the animals' mouths seem a little bit. It took me out of it. Like, oh, forgot this is animation. Yeah.
Well,
but that's a little nitpicking, but overall, fantastic work.
Yeah, I think it's one that stays with me, and we're blessed. We get to check out some of these things through screener form, and like I happen to check when I finished Flow that I still have that screener through February, so I will be watching the movie again.
Yeah, so. my dog would not take his eyes off the screen when he was watching it.
Yeah, check my Instagram. I've got a picture of me and my little kitten that was asleep here, and he's just like, "It's gonna be okay." And that's the thing about it.
What do you think of our assessment of Flow? Keep the conversation going. Put a comment down below. Hit the like and subscribe button. Tell your friends about the show as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Kyle and Nick on Film. We'll see you next time.